The security alarms screamed through the air as masked figures moved like shadows inside the Orion Reserve, one of the most secure banks in the Denveris system. The guards barely had time to react before their weapons were disabled by a high-frequency electromagnetic pulse. The surveillance drones flickered and fell from the air like dead insects. Within seconds, the bank's main vault was breached. The Void Shadows worked fast. There were 4 of them, each from a different alien species, each an expert in their field. Their leader, Talon, was a reptilian Carithian, tall and armored in sleek black plates. His glowing red eyes scanned the vault as he spoke in a low voice. "Move. We have 90 seconds." The others didn't need to be told twice. Zarek, the hacker, connected his neural interface to the vault system, bypassing the secondary lock in mere seconds. Krill, the brute, lifted the heavy crates of platinum credits as if they were weightless. Visa, the getaway pilot, kept an eye on the bank's exterior through her augmented visor, ready to signal their ship. Everything was going smoothly. Too smoothly. As they made their escape, the automated security system rebooted faster than expected. A row of defense turrets unfolded from the ceiling, locking onto them. Zyrex growled, raising his wrist device, which emitted a short pulse that temporarily blinded the sensors. "Time's up. Go." The Void Shadows rushed to the exit, their speed making them almost a blur. Civilians cowered behind counters and furniture, afraid to move. With one final blast charge, the main doors were blown open, and the gang disappeared into the night sky aboard their cloaked ship. Another perfect heist. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, in a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of Trion 7, a man watched the latest newsfeed on a holoscreen. He was human, something not too common in this part of space. Dane Voss, a former soldier turned mercenary, leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers on the table as he listened. The infamous Void Shadows have struck again, stealing over 10 million credits from the Orion Reserve. The Interstellar Police are calling this the most advanced heist in the last 5 years. Authorities have no leads, and experts believe the gang will remain unstoppable. Dane smirked. Unstoppable. Yeah, right. For months, he had been tracking the Void Shadows, trying to find patterns in their crimes. They were precise, methodical, and unlike any criminal gang he had hunted before. Every planet, every security system they bypassed. It all pointed to one thing. They weren't just thieves. They were professionals. But they had made a mistake. Dane replayed the security footage he had obtained from an informant. The video was distorted due to the electromagnetic interference, but there was something the gang hadn't accounted for. Their ship's cloaking field left behind an energy signature when it escaped. Most law enforcement agencies relied too much on technology, and they had missed the small details. But Dane was different. He trusted instincts more than software. "Gotcha," he muttered to himself. His fingers moved across his personal data pad, filtering through star maps and trade routes. If his calculations were correct, the gang would need to refuel and sell off their stolen credits before their next job. And there were only a handful of places in this sector where they could do that. In the dark void of space, the Void Shadows ship drifted silently, hidden among the wreckage of an old battle site. Inside the cockpit, Talon sat in his chair, watching as the stolen credits were being transferred to their hidden accounts. "Another clean job," Zarek said, leaning back with a grin. "No such thing," Cyrex muttered, his claws tapping on the armrest. "There's always a trace, always a hunter looking for us." Visa rolled her eyes. "Relax, boss. The police are too slow. By the time they find a lead, we'll be light years away." Krell chuckled, tossing the stolen security badge onto the table. "Yeah, let them try. We're the best at this." Cyrex didn't look convinced. His instincts were sharp, and right now, they told him something was off. "Keep the ship cloaked. No transmissions, no unnecessary movement," he ordered. Visa groaned. "Paranoid much?" Cyrex didn't answer. He just stared at the holoscreen, where a list of upcoming bank shipments flashed before his eyes. Their next target was the Orc Vault, a legendary bank rumored to hold treasures beyond imagination. It was a challenge, and the Void Shadows never turned down a challenge. But what they didn't know was that Dane Voss was already on their trail. And for the first time, the hunters were about to become the hunted. Dane Voss sat in the cockpit of his modified Starhawk-class cruiser, eyes fixed on the holographic display in front of him. The map of the Denveris system showed several blinking dots, possible locations where the Void Shadows might be hiding. He had been tracking criminals for years, and he knew one thing. Thieves always needed a place to spend their stolen credits, and in this sector, there were only a few places where stolen goods could be exchanged for fresh currency. Voss tapped a few keys on his control panel, zooming in on a small trading station orbiting a dead moon in the outer rim. Ithera 9. It was a lawless place where smugglers, bounty hunters, and criminals did business without fear of the authorities. If the Void Shadows were looking to launder their stolen credits, this was the perfect place to do it. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. "Let's see if you show up, Tyrex Talon." Voss wasn't just going to watch. He was going to set a trap. A dangerous marketplace. The air inside Ithera 9's trade station smelled of fuel, rust, and bad decisions. The station was old, its metal walls covered in dents and scorch marks from years of bar fights and bounty disputes. At the heart of the station was the marketplace, where traders and criminals bartered over stolen tech, rare minerals, and illegal weapons. Among them, dressed in a dark jacket and carrying a concealed energy pistol, was Dane Voss. He moved carefully, scanning the crowd. His sharp eyes searched for familiar faces, looking for any sign of the Void Shadows. He knew that a gang like them wouldn't show up in full force. They were too smart for that. Instead, they would send someone to exchange stolen credits for untraceable currency. And that's when he saw him. A tall, thin alien with gray skin and cybernetic implants was sitting at a trader's booth, speaking in a low voice to a merchant. Voss recognized him instantly. Zarek, the hacker of the Void Shadows. A silent hunt begins. Voss didn't move immediately. He knew that if Zarek sensed danger, he'd run. Instead, Voss positioned himself near another stall, pretending to examine a display of high-powered plasma knives while listening to the conversation. Zarek was transferring stolen credits into a secured chip, one that could be used anywhere without being traced. 10 million Denverian credits, the trader said, inspecting the data chip. Risky money. Where did you get it? Zarek smirked. Do you really want to know? The trader hesitated, then shook his head. Doesn't matter. Payment confirmed. That was enough for Voss. Time to move. He waited until Zarek finished the deal, then started following him through the crowded marketplace. He stayed 3 steps behind, moving through the shadows. Zarek was careful, checking his surroundings every few minutes. But he wasn't careful enough. Voss followed him all the way to a back alley, where a small hoverbike was parked. As Zarek reached for the controls, Voss made his move. In a single swift motion, he grabbed Zarek from behind, twisting his arm and pinning him against the wall. Don't scream. Don't move, Voss whispered, or I'll make sure you don't leave this station at all. Zarek struggled, but Voss tightened his grip. You've been stealing from the wrong people, Zarek. The Interstellar Security Council wants your head. But I don't work for them. I work for myself. Zarek's eyes widened. You're the mercenary, Dane Voss. Voss smirked. Glad to know I'm famous. Baiting the trap. Zarek was trapped. He knew that if he called for help, he might not live long enough for backup to arrive. Voss leaned in. Tell me where Hyrex Talon is. Zarek laughed nervously. You think I'd betray my boss? He'd kill me if I did. Voss smirked. And what do you think I'll do to you? For a moment, Zarek hesitated. Then he sighed. They're planning a big heist. The Orc Vault. Voss's expression didn't change, but inside, He felt a rush of excitement. The Orc Vault was the most secure financial institution in the Crixus sector. If the Void Shadows were targeting it, it meant they had something big planned. "Where's your crew hiding?" Voss pressed. Zarek shook his head. "I don't know. We stay separate until the job is ready." Voss frowned. He could tell Zarek was telling the truth, but that didn't mean he was useless. An idea formed in Voss's mind. "You're going to help me get to them," he said. Zarek blinked. "What? No way." Voss pulled out a small tracking chip and held it up. "Either you do it, or I make sure every bounty hunter in this sector knows where you are. And trust me, they'll shoot first and ask questions later." Zarek swallowed hard. He had no choice. "Fine," he muttered. "But if they find out?" Voss smirked. "They won't, because by the time they do, it'll be too late." He released Zarek, watching as he rubbed his wrist, scowling. Voss stepped back, his trap now in motion. The Void Shadows thought they were untouchable. But now, they had no idea that a hunter was already among them. The dark skies of Ithera 9 shimmered with neon lights from distant space traffic as Dane Voss walked through the underground docking bay. His eyes stayed fixed on Zarek, who moved ahead nervously, glancing back every few seconds. "Stop looking at me," Voss muttered. "Act natural, or your crew will know something's wrong." Zarek swallowed hard and nodded. "They're meeting on the other side of the station. I'll take you there, but if they catch you, you're on your own." Voss smirked. "That's the plan." Zarek sighed, leading the way. The meeting of thieves. Inside a hidden docking bay, the Void Shadows were gathered around a holographic display of their next target, the Orc Vault. The towering reptilian Axirex Talon stood at the center, his claws tapping against the table as he examined the security layout. The outer perimeter is nothing. The real challenge is the core vault. 20 layers of encryption, heat scanners, and pressure-sensitive floors. One wrong step, and alarms go off across the system. Krell, the brute of the group, cracked his knuckles. "So, we break through, take what we want, and leave before they know what hit them." Axirex sighed, turning to Visa, the pilot. "How's our escape plan?" She adjusted her visor. "We'll use the asteroid belt near the vault's location. Once we get the goods, we vanish. No one will follow us through that mess." Cyrex nodded. "Perfect. Then let's." The doors to the docking bay slid open, and everyone turned to see Zarek walking in. Behind him, Dane Voss followed, disguised in a dark jacket, blending into the shadows. Cyrex narrowed his eyes. "You're late, Zarek." Zarek forced a laugh. "Had to make sure the credits got cleaned properly. Took longer than expected." Voss stayed silent, keeping his head low, pretending to be just another hired gun. Cyrex's sharp gaze moved over him. "Who's this?" Zarek hesitated, but Voss spoke first, deepening his voice slightly. "Name's Rays. Zarek hired me for security." Cyrex studied him for a moment. "Security? We don't bring outsiders in on our meetings." Voss gave a casual shrug. "That's smart, but from what I hear, you're about to rob the most secure bank in the sector. You might need extra muscle." Krell snorted. "We don't need help." Voss smirked. "That's what the last gang who tried this job said. None of them made it out." Cyrex stared at him, thinking. He didn't trust easily, but he also knew having another skilled fighter wouldn't hurt. Finally, he nodded. "Fine, but you follow orders. No mistakes." Voss grinned. "Wouldn't dream of it." Inside the enemy's den, over the next few hours, Voss observed everything. The Void Shadows were good. Really good. Their plan was airtight. They had timed diversions, hacked security bypasses, and even a stolen access key from a corrupt official. But Voss saw one weakness: their overconfidence. They thought they were untouchable. They believed no one could outsmart them. Voss had dealt with criminals like this before. That arrogance would be their downfall. As the team finalized their heist plan, Voss sent a silent, coded signal from his hidden wrist device. The signal was short, untraceable, and sent directly to his ship's onboard AI, Phantom. Target confirmed. Begin Phase 2. The trap was in motion. Unseen moves. Later that night, as the Void Shadows slept inside their hideout, Voss moved silently through the corridors, planting tiny tracking beacons on their weapons, vehicles, and personal gear. If they escaped after the heist, he would always know where they went. He also switched the security codes on their escape route. When they tried to leave after the heist, they would find themselves locked inside the bank's vault instead. By the time they realized what happened, it would be too late. As Voss placed the final tracker, he whispered to himself, "You're not getting away this time." The last step. Before leaving the hideout, Voss needed one more thing. Proof. He accessed their central database, copying all their heist plans onto a secure chip. This would be evidence to turn them in, and a bargaining chip in case he needed leverage. Just as he was about to leave, a deep voice came from behind him. "You move pretty quiet for hired muscle." Voss turned slowly. Zyrex stood in the doorway, watching him. For a second, Voss considered his options. He could try to talk his way out, or he could fight his way out. But then, Zyrex smirked. "I like that." He crossed his arms. "Let's see if you're just as quick during the heist." Voss nodded. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." Inside, he smiled. The Void Shadows had no idea they had just welcomed their biggest enemy into their ranks. The Auric Vault stood like a towering fortress on the surface of Veltrax 5, a wealthy trade planet known for its high-security financial institutions. It was more than just a bank. It was a stronghold, protected by layered shields, robotic sentries, and an elite security force. But the Void Shadows weren't afraid. Inside their hidden transport ship, docked far from the main city, Zyrex Talon and his team prepared for the heist of a lifetime. They had everything planned. Disguises, forged access codes, security bypass devices, and an escape route through the nearby asteroid belt. And among them, standing with his arms crossed, was Dane Voss, still pretending to be one of them. His real plan: to make sure they never left the vault alive. Breaking into the unbreakable. The first phase of the heist relied on deception. Voss, Zyrex, and Krell walked towards the vault's security checkpoint, dressed in uniforms stolen from a delivery service. The forged ID chips in their pockets would get them through the first set of doors. At the same time, Zarek and Visa hacked into the main security grid, looping the surveillance feed so that no one would see them enter. The guards at the checkpoint barely looked up as Voss and the others walked through. The ID chips scanned green, and the heavy doors slid open, allowing them inside. Step 1. Success. Once inside, Zyrex turned to the team. "We've got 10 minutes before the guards do a status check. Let's move." They split up. Krell and Voss headed for the security room, while Zyrex and Visa moved towards the main vault doors. Voss followed Krell through the tight corridors, his mind racing. He had already planted tracking devices on their gear, but now came the real challenge: disabling their escape. Sabotage in motion. Inside the security room, 2 vault technicians sat at their desks, monitoring camera feeds. They didn't notice Krell and Voss step in behind them. Before they could react, Krell knocked them out cold with a single punch. Voss raised an eyebrow. Was that necessary? Krell grinned. "What? You want me to shake their hands?" Voss smirked but said nothing. While Krell destroyed the alarm system, Voss moved towards the access terminal. He had 1 minute to lock them inside. He typed in a custom override command, reprogramming the vault's security system. Instead of allowing an emergency exit, it would now seal all doors once the heist was in motion. By the time they realized what happened, they'd be trapped inside the most secure bank in the galaxy. Voss hit ENTR. No turning back now. The vault opens. At the main vault doors, Hyrex and Visa worked quickly. Zarek's hacking device cracked through the final layer of encryption, and with a loud hiss, the vault doors unlocked. Inside, millions of credits, gold-plated bars, and rare alien artifacts gleamed under bright security lights. Krell and Voss arrived just in time to see the gang step inside, eyes filled with greed. Zyrex grinned. "We did it." Visa smirked. "Easiest job of our lives." Voss said nothing. They had no idea they were walking into their own trap. Betrayal in the vault. The moment the void shadows began collecting the stolen riches, the alarms went off. Loud, deafening sirens echoed through the vault as red security lights flashed. Zyrex spun around. "What the?" Visa checked her hacking device. "No, we bypassed everything. This isn't possible." Krell growled. "We've been set up." Voss stepped forward, a smirk on his face. "Yeah, you have." Thyrex's eyes widened. "You?" Before anyone could react, the vault doors slammed shut, locking them inside. Zarek ran to the control panel, typing frantically. "The system isn't responding." Voss crossed his arms. "That's because I changed it." For the first time, the void shadows realized what had happened. They had let a hunter into their crew, and now they were trapped like prey. Thyrex lunged at Voss, but Voss was faster. He dodged, slamming his elbow into Cyrex's side before drawing his plasma pistol. "Not so fun when you're on the other side, huh?" Voss smirked. Krell roared in fury, but just as he took a step forward, gas began hissing from the vents. Voss had planned everything. The vault's emergency lockdown protocol released knockout gas into the chamber. Visa coughed, stumbling. "No, not like this." Zarek collapsed first, followed by Visa and Krell. Tyrex staggered towards Voss, fury burning in his reptilian eyes. "You won't win." Voss didn't move. He simply watched as the gas did its job. Tyrex took one last step before falling to the ground, unconscious. The hunter wins. Voss took a deep breath and holstered his weapon. He pressed a button on his wrist to send a signal to his ship. Target secured. Outside, the vault's security team rushed into action. Within minutes, heavily armed guards entered the room, finding the void shadows unconscious on the floor. One of the lead officers turned to Voss. "You really did it. You took them down." Voss smirked. "Told you they weren't unstoppable." The officer nodded. "The Interstellar Council will pay you well for this." Voss shrugged. "Keep the money. Just make sure they never walk free again." As he stepped out of the vault, he took one last look at Cyrex, lying motionless. The greatest thieves in the galaxy had fallen, and the best hunter in the universe had claimed his prize. The void shadows were defeated. Their leader, Cyrex Talon, and his crew lay unconscious inside the Auric vault, taken down by Daneboss's plan. Security forces stormed the chamber, securing the criminals with heavy-duty restraints, ensuring they couldn't escape. The officer in charge, a tall, armored Varaxi enforcer, nodded at Voss. "The Interstellar Security Council will be pleased. These thieves have been a nightmare for years." Voss crossed his arms, glancing at Cyrex's unconscious form. They thought they were untouchable. Now, they'll rot in a maximum security prison. The officer smirked. "You should stick around for the bounty reward." Voss shook his head. "I don't do this for the money. My job's done." As he turned to leave, his instincts screamed at him. Something wasn't right. A job this clean. Too easy. Voss stopped mid-step. His gut told him to check one last thing. The unfinished job. Instead of heading for his ship, Voss walked toward the security control room. Inside, a group of officers monitored the vault's systems and prisoners. "Play back the footage from 5 minutes ago," he ordered. One of the officers frowned. "Why?" "The gang's already captured." Voss narrowed his eyes. "Do it." The officer hesitated, then rewound the security feed. The holographic screen displayed the moment the vault doors sealed. The gas filled the chamber, knocking out the void shadows. Voss watched carefully. Everything seemed normal, until his eyes locked onto one detail. Visa, the gang's pilot, had activated something on her wrist device right before losing consciousness. Voss froze. His mind raced. A signal, a backup plan, a failsafe. His fingers flew across the security console. If she had triggered something, there would be. His worst fear was confirmed. A silent distress beacon had been sent out, just before the gang was captured. Voss clenched his jaw. Tell me that transmission was blocked. The officer's face turned pale. It wasn't. A cold realization hit Voss. The job wasn't over. An unexpected twist. Voss turned on his comlink. Phantom scanned the system for incoming ships. His AI assistant responded instantly. Scanning. Alert. Multiple unidentified vessels entering Veltrax 5's orbit. His heart pounded. Reinforcements were coming. The void shadows weren't alone. A deep voice echoed through the security room speakers, interrupting the security officer's chatter. To the authorities of Veltrax 5, you have something that belongs to us. Release them now, or we will take them by force. Voss's blood ran cold. More of them. The battle begins. Within minutes, the sky above Veltrax 5 filled with black warships, bearing the mark of the Crimson Fang, an underground mercenary syndicate. They weren't here for a rescue mission. They were here for revenge. The planetary defenses kicked in, and anti-aircraft turrets locked onto the approaching enemy ships. Warning sirens blared across the city. Voss rushed outside, looking up at the sky. You've got to be kidding me. The void shadows had powerful allies. The security officer ran up to Voss. What do we do? We're outnumbered. Voss took a deep breath. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He wasn't a hero. But he wasn't about to let criminals walk free. He turned to the officer. You focus on defense. I'll handle this my way. The officer frowned. What way? Voss smirked. I'll make them regret ever coming here. The hunter strikes back. Voss sprinted to his Starhawk-class cruiser, jumping into the cockpit. Phantom, weapons online. Weapons ready. The ship's engines roared as he blasted off into the sky, heading straight toward the oncoming mercenary fleet. The enemy ships opened fire, but Voss's reflexes were sharper than any AI. He twisted the controls, dodging plasma bolts and locking onto his first target. Let's see how tough you really are. He fired a concentrated ion blast, hitting one of the mercenary ships. It exploded instantly, sending debris scattering. But the enemy fleet didn't slow down. Instead, their largest warship pushed forward, deploying drop pods that shot toward the surface. They weren't just attacking from the air. They were invading the city. The ground war begins. Voss's ship landed back near the vault, and he jumped out, gripping his plasma rifle. The first wave of mercenary soldiers hit the ground, their weapons blazing. Security forces tried to fight back, but they were outgunned. Voss joined the battle, using cover and quick movements to take down multiple enemies. A mercenary charged him, but Voss dodged, delivering a brutal kick to the soldier's knee, making him collapse before finishing him with a single precise shot. Voss wasn't just a mercenary. He was a hunter, and this was his territory. But the real danger was still ahead. Through the smoke and chaos, a massive armored figure stepped forward, the leader of the Crimson Fang, a hulking alien warlord with metal plating fused into his body. His glowing red eyes locked onto Voss. You're the one who took my people down. Voss grinned. Guilty. The warlord cracked his knuckles, his voice filled with rage. Then you die first. Smoke and fire filled the streets of Veltrax 5 as the mercenary invasion raged on. Buildings shook from the explosions, alarms screamed across the city, and security forces struggled to hold their ground. In the middle of the chaos, Dane Voss stood face to face with the warlord of the Crimson Fang. The massive alien, covered in thick armor plating and cybernetic enhancements, stared at Voss with glowing red eyes. "You made a mistake, human," the warlord growled. "Those prisoners belong to us. Step aside." Voss cracked his neck and smirked. "I don't take orders from criminals." The warlord's lips curled into a snarl. "Then you die with them." Without warning, the warlord lunged forward, swinging a metal-plated fist at Voss. Voss barely dodged, rolling to the side as the punch shattered a chunk of concrete where he had been standing. This guy was fast. Voss didn't waste time. He raised his plasma rifle and fired, but the warlord activated an energy shield on his arm, blocking the shots. "Your weapons are useless," the warlord taunted. Voss gritted his teeth. "Guess I'll have to get creative." Fighting a monster, Voss ran toward a nearby wrecked vehicle, using it as cover as the warlord charged after him. He reached into his belt, grabbing a pulse grenade. The warlord lunged again, but Voss ducked low and rolled beneath him, planting the grenade on his back armor before sprinting away. The warlord laughed. "You think a grenade will?" Boom! The explosion ripped through his back plating, sending him staggering forward. Smoke poured from the damage, and sparks flickered from his cybernetic implants. Voss smirked. "Looks like it worked." The warlord roared in rage, turning back toward Voss with fury in his eyes. He wasn't down yet, holding the line. Meanwhile, the security forces struggled against the mercenary army. The Crimson Fang soldiers were well-trained, equipped with heavy armor and advanced weapons. The planetary forces were outnumbered, and many were falling back toward the vault. One of the officers called out over the comms, "We can't hold much longer. We need reinforcements." Voss gritted his teeth. They weren't going to last. He grabbed his communicator and contacted Phantom, his AI assistant. "Phantom, execute emergency plan. Call in my backup." The AI responded immediately. "Confirmed. Activating allied support." An unexpected backup. Far above Veltrax 5, Voss's personal warship, the Shadowhawk, hovered in stealth mode. Upon receiving his signal, the ship's autopilot activated, and from its hidden cargo bay, a squad of combat drones launched into the sky. They descended like streaks of lightning, joining the battle below. The Crimson Fang soldiers turned in shock as the drones opened fire, taking down multiple mercenaries in seconds. Security forces regrouped, using the distraction to fight back with renewed strength. The battle had just turned in their favor. The final strike. But Voss still had one problem. The warlord wasn't finished. Despite the damage, he was still standing, still dangerous. He grabbed a massive energy blade from his back, the weapon crackling with power. Voss sighed. "Of course you have a sword." The warlord charged. Voss rolled to the side, avoiding the deadly swing. The blade sliced through metal like paper, cutting deep into the ground. Voss fired his plasma pistol, aiming for the warlord's exposed wounds. The shots hit, but the warlord kept coming. Voss needed an opening, a weakness. Then he saw it, the exposed cybernetic implants in the warlord's damaged back. That's it. Voss ran toward the nearest rooftop, using his jet boots to leap onto a higher vantage point. The warlord followed, climbing with brute strength. Voss waited until the perfect moment. Then he jumped off the roof, flipping through the air. As he passed over the warlord, he pulled out his last high-powered EMP grenade. "Let's see how tough you are without your fancy tech." He slammed the grenade onto the warlord's exposed cybernetics and landed behind him. The warlord turned, eyes wide. "No." VZZZC. The grenade discharged, sending a powerful EMP shock through the warlord's body. His cybernetics fried instantly, his energy shield flickered and failed, and his enhanced strength vanished. Voss didn't wait. He delivered one final brutal kick, sending the warlord crashing to the ground. Unconscious. The battle was over. Victory at last. With the warlord defeated, the remaining Crimson Fang mercenaries panicked. They saw their leader fall. They saw their numbers shrinking. And they ran. The security forces cheered as the mercenaries retreated back to their ships, fleeing into orbit. The invasion had failed. Voss stood over the fallen warlord, breathing heavily. An officer walked up beside him. "You just saved this planet." Voss smirked. "Not the first time." The officer grinned. "We'll take care of the rest. The bounty on the warlord alone is enough to buy you a new ship." Voss chuckled. "Tempting. But I think I'll stick with the one I've got." As the battle ended and peace returned, Voss turned his eyes to the stars. He knew this wasn't the last fight. There were always more criminals, more threats, and he would always be there to stop them. Because he wasn't just a mercenary. He was a hunter. The battle for Gultrax 5 was over. Smoke still rose from the damaged buildings, and security forces worked to secure the last of the captured mercenaries. The Crimson Fang's warlord lay unconscious, his cybernetics fried, and the remaining mercenaries had retreated into space, unwilling to fight without their leader. Dane Voss stood among the aftermath, breathing heavily as he took in the scene. His body ached, bruised from the intense fight, but he had won. The Void Shadows were captured, and their reinforcements had failed. A security officer walked up to him, helmet under one arm, shaking his head in disbelief. "I don't know how you pulled it off, but you did. The bounty on these guys will be massive." Voss smirked. "I don't do this for money." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Then what do you do it for?" Voss glanced down at the unconscious Kyrex Talon, the leader of the Void Shadows. "Because someone has to stop people like them. Clean up and consequences." The next few hours were spent locking down the captured criminals, treating the wounded, and assessing the damage to the city. The Interstellar Security Council sent reinforcements, taking the Void Shadows and the Crimson Fang warlord into custody. They would be transported to a high-security prison, one from which no one had ever escaped. As the criminals were escorted onto a prison transport ship, Kyrex Talon finally regained consciousness. His red reptilian eyes locked onto Voss, filled with hatred. "You should have killed me," Kyrex growled. Voss tilted his head. "And let you off easy." "Nah." Kyrex smirked. "This isn't over, human. There are bigger players than you realize, more powerful than you can imagine." Voss shrugged. "Let them come. I'll take them down too." The security officers forced Kyrex onto the transport, and the doors sealed shut behind him. As the ship lifted off, disappearing into the sky, Voss finally felt a sense of satisfaction, a quiet victory. Later that night, Voss sat on the edge of a landing pad, staring up at the stars. His trusted AI, Phantom, activated on his wrist device. "You have new bounty offers," Phantom informed him. "Several clients are requesting your services." Voss chuckled. "Figures. You take down a few criminals, and suddenly everyone wants your help." Phantom continued. "Would you like to review the missions?" Voss thought about it for a moment. The thrill of the chase, the danger, the adrenaline. He wasn't ready to stop. But for now, he wanted a moment of peace. "Not today, Phantom. I think I've earned a break." "Understood," the AI responded. "However, I must remind you that trouble tends to find you, even when you're not looking for it." Voss smirked. "Yeah, I've noticed." A mysterious message. Just as he leaned back to enjoy the quiet, his communicator buzzed. Frowning, Voss checked the incoming transmission. It was encrypted, with no sender ID. A robotic voice played through his earpiece. "You're making enemies in high places, Hunter. Be careful where you step." Voss's eyes narrowed. "Who is this?" he asked. The voice didn't answer. Instead, a set of coordinates flashed onto his screen, a location in deep space, far beyond any charted sector. Then the message cut off. Voss stared at the coordinates, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Looks like my break will have to wait." The hunter never rests. As the city lights of Veltrax 5 flickered behind him, Voss climbed into his Starhawk-class cruiser. The engines roared to life, and the ship lifted off into the night sky, leaving behind the battlefield and heading toward the unknown. A new hunt had begun, and Dane Voss was ready for it.